You know how it is? A hair falls down out of the perfectly hairsprayed hair, and because you're at work without any hairspray, you just yank it out of your scalp, completely forgetting about the hairlines of most of the men in your family, so you really need to make the most of the hair that you still have. Also, stings. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today is the beginning of another reading vlog. I said that I was going to finish reading The Burgess Boys by Elizabeth Strout before I next saw you, and that was a little bit of a fib. I didn't know it was going to be. I arrived home from work on Saturday, and so my mum had been at the hospital with my grandmother and then taken my grandmother back to this care home. I just said, let's have a takeaway, which, you know, as somebody who has struggled with their weight in the past and is currently trying to lose some more weight, probably not the best idea. But also didn't have any food in the house and no one was really prepared to go out shopping. And then my sister arrived with her boyfriend and my dad, well, our dad, as in my sister and my dad. So they joined us for the Chinese, and it ended up being this night of just reminiscing, eating food, chatting and that sort of thing, as opposed to the evening I thought I was going to have, which was editing a video, reading and watching Drag Race. So then yesterday morning, watched Drag Race and my sister arrived again. So the walk that I got planned didn't happen until quite late. The video went online late. I didn't sit down to read until 10 o'clock. However, I have now reached book 2 within The Burgess Boys. A lot of the time last night I was questioning whether to DNF this book. It is one of those strange coincidences with this book, in that in A Change of Climate we were dealing with some racism, and in The Burgess Boys there is racism in here, and Bob, who is the brother who the other two siblings don't necessarily like and they look down upon him. He's a rather liberal left-wing person, but his sister Susan and their other brother Jim are both quite right-wing and aren't the nicest people in the world. And I just wasn't sure that I wanted to read about these racist characters for another 300 pages. Elizabeth Strout, I guess, is trying to challenge us, maybe. The story so far has been that Susan's son has thrown a pig's head into a mosque and has been arrested for a hate crime, and we got to actually, for the first time in a Strout that I can think of, apart from the Olive books, went into the lives of the Somali people living in Shirley Falls and what they saw happen, which was the police laughing at the plight. And I wonder whether it's going to be this question of Zach doing what he believes his mother would want him to do, or a question of what did you expect to happen given the way you have behaved and raised him. But I don't know. I'm hopeful that we might get to see some change of opinion, but at the moment it's been very white and right-wing, and I'm just really not here for that. Anyway, I have to say, what happened on Saturday and Sunday is sod's law, and is what happens every single time I make any sort of reading plans or share them. So I need to not do that, especially if I want to read more books this week. I found a poetry collection that I said I'd review, so I need to get that read this week too. It's Monday. I've pulled a hair out of my head and I don't yet feel like I'm currently inhabiting my body, so I'll go and have some coffee. ended up DNFing the Burgess boys yesterday. I kept thinking about it throughout Monday, and I had no impetus to pick this book up. Then I saw a comment from my vlog where someone said about how the middle of this book had bored them, and I thought, well, I'm already bored 100 pages in. Elizabeth Strout is a writer I admire, but this book isn't doing it for me. I just don't have any want to read books about right-wing people, and even if there's the possibility that they might get over those preconceived ideas, I still just can't contend with that today, or yesterday, or this week, really. So I spoke to Charlie in the morning, and last week we'd had a conversation about me donating books and removing them from my shelves, and she says, if you're asking me, you've already made the decision. And I knew that I just had to DNF that book. I don't know whether it's a DNF for now or a DNF forever, but right now I have no want to go back to that book. And it's irksome to me as well, because obviously all the books I included on the alternate women's prize list were ones I thought would be the best books on my shelves by female writers. And I really like Elizabeth Strout, but I did not like this book. So I went and I read a short pamphlet that I was sent for review, which is And I Will Make of You a Vowel Sound by Morag Anderson. Recommend this book. It is only 33 pages of poetry, and when I am able to go and buy poetry again, I am hoping to go and buy a full collection by this poet, because it's everything that I like in poetry. I really respond well to assonance, and in terms of poetry, I respond well to tales that seem easily accessible, but they have these images that can be quite stark and can be quite brutal at times. I gain some sense of attachment when things that I can remember from my childhood will get mentioned, or things that I can understand. So basically, I like anything that I relate to, and I related to some of the poems in here. I really want to see what else Morag Anderson has written, and it also proved to be something of a palate cleanser after the days spent that I end up feeling like I wasted on the Burgess boys. I then read Ducks by Kate Beaton, which is the graphic novel that Charlie chose for me to read in February for our Charlie Challenge. I have been meaning to read this book for over a year. I finally got it purchased for me for my birthday, and it is a book which is to do with the Canadian issue of how people are unable to actually afford to stay in their home cities and their hometowns, so they go off west to the oil sands, which is an incredibly brutal environment in which to live, filled with misogyny, and if a woman goes there, she experiences sexual harassment because the men believed, since they haven't seen women in a long time, it's like free game. And so this is a tough book to read. There is definite trigger warnings for sexual assaults, sexual harassment, and some pretty awful misogynistic language. But Kate Beaton does have an afterword at the end of this and talks about how this book was 20 years ago, and whilst it is her experiences, hopefully things have changed since then, and also has some discussion about what these oil sands removed from the indigenous communities of Canada. So I thoroughly recommend Ducks as a memoir, and to gain a piece of knowledge about Canada that I didn't have, but I think now I do. I am appreciative to know about this and to have this knowledge. And then last night, whilst lying in bed, I started reading Amy and Lan. I don't know if I'm going to continue reading this. I am 48 pages into it. I got sent this book for review last year to coincide with the paperback release. I didn't sign any contract saying that I had to review this by a certain time. It is another book that I included on my alternative Women's Prize long list, and it's from the perspective of the children, which isn't that big of a problem really. However, I am finding the perspectives of Amy and Lan rather similar. I don't know whether that's going to change, because I do know that this book spans 5 years. So perhaps as the children grow older, there will be some change in the language. One thing I have liked is how there is a bit of a lack of focus for the children, so they're not really taking in everything that's happening. There's an immediacy there that I think is definitely there for children. We'll see with this one. Currently undecided what will happen. Probably won't be reading much more today, simply because, anyway, I'll be speaking to the Italian lady this evening, and our conversations usually last for an hour, and I still have to go and walk the dog after I record here, and so probably won't get much chance to read today. I'm recording rather late today. Usually I am done by now, but my dad's once again waiting for news from the garage about his vehicle, and he stayed in and the car's still not done, so we will see what happens there. Otherwise, that's how my day's likely to go. Take the dog for a walk once I've finished here, be back within the next 2 hours, maybe take my dad for his car, we'll see, make tea, speak Italian for an hour, and then I've got a few hours in which I don't know what I'll do, because I reached the end of season 5 of Modern Family yesterday, and I'm trying to wean myself to just 3 episodes a day, which has been the case for the majority of my watching, just because I don't want it to end. At the same time, I'm concerned that the way streaming services work, that it could all get taken offline tomorrow, and then where will I be? I'm enjoying this show. I find it comforting, even though it's white. These people are rich, and I could never hope to have any of their wealth, but it's a nice family show, and sometimes you just like a nice family show when BBC iPlayer removes Dinner Lady, so you can no longer just keep binge watching that every single day. Also been watching Mandy, but more on that later. Either way, if I don't see you tomorrow, I'll see you Friday. Earlier this week, I just put my favourite songs on shuffle and listened to those on the way into work. But today, everyone's talking about Taylor Swift's new album, so I listened to that on the way into work. It upsets me no end that I could not switch that off. I think fans of hers will really enjoy it, but to me, it just sounded somewhat generic. So now that I'm at work, I intend to stop listening to that and listen to some favourite songs before people arrive. I've also discovered we've had a huge influx of books, some good ones as well, but people here don't necessarily have the same respect for books that I do, so some of the new ones have been getting crushed underneath the shelf, which is very upsetting because there are some very popular books that I know folk will like. Yesterday, I finished reading Amy and Lan by Sadie Jones. I didn't have much left. Do you have those books? You don't put a bookmark in them. For me, sometimes I won't use a bookmark because I think, well, I don't know whether it's deserved one yet. It feels like a promise that I'm going to come back to this book, and I don't know whether I actually am. And that was how I felt on Wednesday. But then I was just sat there and thinking, well, I may as well read some. And then I'd read 220 pages on Wednesday night, so I just finished it yesterday morning. I liked it. I don't think it's the most amazing book in the world. I'm not wanting to rush out and read everything that Sadie Jones has ever written. I had my issues with it. I thought that the two voices that she's writing in of Amy and Lan became indistinguishable from each other towards the end, and you'd have to use the cues that she was giving you of, oh well, since Lan's not calling this person dad, it must be Amy. But for me it became a bit confusing in that sense because the voices were so indistinguishable from one another. And maybe this was a choice on Sadie Jones' part to show how the characters were exceptionally similar, but personally I think that it was just an inability to craft two separate voices. I also find it difficult when reading books about farming or agriculture because it's a background I grew up in, and I often find that the way in which it's written about is in this almost glorified look at us working the land type of way. I did appreciate that Sadie Jones focused on some of the more dirtier, grimmer aspects of farming within the book, but overall it was almost giving this sense of an Eden about the place. And yes, as a reader you can see the cracks from this, and you are getting it from the idealised perspective of children, but that part I didn't care for. But there were some scenes in there that had me having some sort of emotional feeling to them, such as when they are killing a chicken or when they're talking about killing all these pigs. That appealed to the vegetarian of Charlie. It's a book that really meanders for about 250 pages, with suggestions as to how the book's going to end before ultimately we reach the end that has been inevitable all along. So yes, I did like the book, but it's not the most amazing thing that I've ever read. The characters didn't really have any character either, and the more I talk about this, the more I'm going to find more and more issues with it, because further issues with the fact that if the author didn't tell you that this book was set in 2005/7 and then 2010, there are no cues as to what year in the last century it's been. There are no cultural references or anything like that, and I wonder whether she did this to keep this somewhat timeless, but another part of me thinks that it maybe involved a bit more research. I don't know. I think that there's a way to signify what year something is without saying it's 2007, it's 2010. And yes, then you would get Charlie getting really annoyed over whether the research had been done well, and maybe that was another reason not to do it, because everyone's a nitpicker nowadays. I don't know. I just didn't care for that aspect either. Either way, I started reading Sea Change yesterday, and I am now 60 pages into it. I don't want this to be our second DNF of the week, but we will see how I get on with it. At the moment, I spoke to myself last night. I said if I read 60 pages today, then 60 pages tomorrow, and then finish it on Sunday, that's fine. I probably wouldn't be picking up another book anyway due to being at work, but it's another tale of a depressed woman moving, and I was interested because it talked about the fact that Aurora's boyfriend has beggared off to join a space mission to Mars. She's got an absent father, and the octopus who she's connected with, because it's the octopus that her father brought back from the Bering Strait, is about to be sold, and this has sent it into a spiral. It's just written in a rather plain style that I don't think that I gel that well with, and also I thought there was going to be more about the octopus. I love a cephalopod, what can I say? But it seems that it's just going to be about this woman, her sadness, and going back in her life to show where all these sadnesses originated. And I think I don't have a problem with those books existing, but I don't necessarily want to read them myself. I'll see you tomorrow and I'll give you a decision. But you know, we could have 2 books on my alternative Women's Prize long list from my shelves that I've just not finished. This one will be upsetting though, because I went back to the Whitby bookshop to pick this up after putting it down after 3 days. As with every Saturday, I'm just here to draw a line under proceedings, and this week has been bookended by DNFs. I have chosen to stop reading Sea Change by Gina Chung, which is disappointing to me, because I saw this book in the Whitby bookshop last year when I was on holiday and kept thinking about the blurb, so went back a few days later and purchased it. The blurb on this book is a disservice to the tale, because what it says on the blurb isn't necessarily what you see within the actual book. If you are a fan of the style of literature that a few people on BookTube have coined as depressed woman moving through the world, then you might like Sea Change by Gina Chung. It is a book in which, many years earlier, the protagonist Aurora's father went missing, and this is set in a not too distant future. In this future, global warming has happened, and Aurora's boyfriend decides that he's going to join this volunteer trial to head off to Mars and think about repopulating a colony over there, since everyone is going to end up fleeing the planet. And there's a lot of mutated animals, of which this giant octopus, Dolores, is one of them, who Aurora's absent father discovered many years earlier. In the beginning of this book, she discovers that Dolores has been sold to somebody who wishes to put her in his home aquarium, and this sends Aurora into a spiral. From there, we go back into this character's childhood and we look at what might have led her to end up becoming more depressed and becoming the heavy drinker that she has become. We look at Korean culture and the way in which mental health is viewed through that lens. I just did not get on with the writing style. For me, there was an interiority to it, which is perhaps the sort of thing that people who read this literature appreciate, but for me, I wanted to know more about the world outside of Aurora, and I feel like for me, I've read one too many books like this, and I'm just not a fan of this almost stilted dialogue where there's a lot of telling over showing, a lot of trying to pull the reader onto the character's side by writing it in a way of this person not understanding the world, and it just felt very cliche in the way it was done. Like, this book is definitely a dime a dozen nothing special type thing, and I couldn't be bothered reading past the 120 page mark, so I decided that it's been put aside. If this had been the weird book that I thought it was going to be, about this woman trying to save this octopus that she's developed an affection for, like, the blurb made it sound as though she was replacing her boyfriend with this octopus, and that's not the sort of weird sort of tentacle porn style fiction that I want to read, because I don't want to read that. But I thought I was getting some sort of weird fiction in the way that this book was described, something speculative, and that's not it. It's someone trying to put a twist in there and trying to create some sort of metaphor about him heading off to Mars and Dolores being the water and that sort of thing, but nah mate, wasn't here for it. The Drag Race finale aired last night and I watched the final lip sync this morning. I am glad of the winner, but might have been hoping for a double win, but honestly for me, any of the top 3 people could have taken this win. I thought that it's been a very fantastic season and reminded me of the seasons that I used to like, my favourite seasons. And that's it. Now I bookended my week with DNFs, and I'm hoping that in the next week I actually end up finding some books that I stick with. The more that I try and read from my shelves, the more I'm recognising that there are actually books on there I'm not interested in. I'm recognising that I can give it time before purchasing books. I don't have to get them because they're new and shiny. I just donated some books to the charity shop today that literally were only on my shelves because I saw that there was a sale on. I wanted to support the publisher because they were a small press, and I don't know why I bothered doing that, because having read the blurbs and read quite a few pages out of each of them, I'm thinking I never would have liked this book. There is nothing within this book that connects to what I like to read. This is continuing to be a great experiment for me of just reading from my shelves. I think it's helping me consider what sort of books I actually do like, what I want to be reading, and hopefully if I do reach the point where I have no books left on my shelves to read and I'm just going out and borrowing them from the library or buying the ones that I want to read when I see them, I'm hopeful that that might lend itself to me only reading books that I enjoy. I mean, technically, if I keep DNFing them, I am only going to be reading the books I enjoy because I won't end up finishing the ones I'm disliking. But hey, I still managed to read and finish 3 books this week, and that's 5 books off my shelf for the entire week because I'm not going to go back to Sea Change or the Burgess boys, and then I've donated another 5 this morning, so that's 10 gone from the shelves in a week. Part of me is like, this is cheating, Charlie, but also, who are we really cheating either? It's all my own thing to get to a fewest number of books unread on my shelf, so we're winning in a way. At least that's what I keep telling myself. If you have read any of the books that I have mentioned in today's video and would like to discuss them, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.